I gotcha. Well, there's a lot of concern, anger, absolute disgust with China right now over the coronavirus, the misinformation that was provided, the disinformation, the propaganda that they're trying now. You were Secretary of State, a UN ambassador. I know you might have different approaches to this administration, but from your diplomatic expertise, what do you think the United States should do to deal with China going forward?
Well, first of all, I think that China really does bear responsibility for a lot of the problems at the beginning, not having revealed any information, lack of transparency, and that is something that we have to deal with. Because I think that it really did harm the whole situation, and them also kind of trying to blame us for some things. But the bottom line, then, is that I think we need to figure out how to press them now on a whole series of issues that we need to cooperate on, some on the supply chains, some on the way that we're going to have to deal internationally with this. And the difficulty, I think, of being a diplomat and the trade itself is that you have to figure out how to compete with countries, tell it like it is, and at the same time try find areas where you can cooperate, especially in the kind of a world that we live in now. But they are not going to avoid responsibility for this, their lack of information at the beginning and still their lack of transparency. Mm-hmm. But I think we now need to figure out how to solve some of the current problems that we're having in terms of supply chain issues and dealing with this globally.
You are also a UN ambassador, and the World Health Organization, which is one of the agencies within the UN, there's frustration with them as well for having taken China at its word. And the Trump administration is saying, we're going to take a hard look at this. What would you do here? Would you figure out a way to have more American influence, or would you consider pulling funding?
Well, I would not consider pulling funding because I know from the difficulties. When I was up at the UN initially, the Bush administration had not paid up some of the peacekeeping operations, and it was very hard as we were trying to get reform to have a voice. Because if you are not at the table, you're not able to get the kind of reforms that you need. So I would very much urge that we understand what the WHO stands for, what we need to do. I would not pull us out of it. I think we need to figure out how much we need to pay. But I think it's a real mistake because you have no influence over what you need to do at the UN if you're not at the table, and we wouldn't be at the table.
Can I ask you about Iran? Because they have a big outbreak. They're trying to see if they could get out of some of the sanctions that the Trump administration has put on them because of their nuclear weapons program, or nuclear program, I should say. Your thoughts on whether the United States should relax any of that?
Well, let me just say our sanctions normally never include issues to do with food and medicine, and I know that that's one of the issues that's out there. I do think, and you won't surprise you when I say I think it was a mistake.
Well, the Trump administration did offer some additional support, but it was rejected by the Iranians because we wouldn't relax on sanctions.
Well, and I think that that's their problem that they rejected it. But I do think that the sanctions are a very important tool. But I also do think, frankly, that we kind of lost our credibility because of pulling out of the nuclear agreement with them. So obviously our relationship with Iran is very tense. I do think we need to understand their health issues. And we have a very tense relationship with them. And I think that the sanctions are a good tool if they do not harm the people. And that is one of the issues.
For this pandemic coming at this time during an election year, you have former Vice President Joe Biden. He's now won the endorsement of former President Obama, and he's going to have to figure out a way to campaign in this area. And, China could really be a big deal, and America might be really frustrated. How might you advise him to thread that needle?
Well, I do think I can just assure you, having known Senator Biden and then Vice President Biden, he is somebody that is very, very good at diplomacy and understanding how to do something which is to be tough and at the same time trying to find areas where we can cooperate. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of statecraft, it is important to understand how to be very clear with what you think, and at the same time, understand that you can cooperate and compete and try to figure out some kind of a way of working together. It is not kind of thinking that you can give China a pass. As I said earlier, we need to figure out what they did and why they didn't do what they were supposed to. But I think that for everybody's sake, we need to figure